Hello, and welcome back to Weston the Historian. Today, I just wanted to talk about some books that I read this year, and some books I'm currently reading, and some books that I plan on reading in the future. Alright, so, starting off with Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima. I don't have a list in front of me, but I'm trying to just remember them and generate them off of the top of my head. So Sun and Steel by Yukio Mishima. Yukio Mishima, he was a famous Japanese author. But most of what he wrote was novels. But Sun and Steel was not a novel. It is his personal journey with working out and martial arts and embracing the, life of the sun and whatever, and, going outside more. Basically that. It's very interesting to read. He writes very profoundly, I will say. He has an interesting way with words. I will say that he has a very interesting way with words. It's a wonderful read. A friend of mine is currently borrowing that and reading it. Another wonderful book that I read this year was Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. It's wonderful. If you need, a book that pretty much summarizes almost all of the basic things about, Christian theology, but also, give some good insight into things which you might not have thought about before. Oh, this is a wonderful book. And C.S. Lewis is a wonderful author. So Mere Christianity, yeah, I would 100% recommend you reading that. I forgot to say, I would recommend reading Sun and Steel as well. So Sun and Steel, that, another book that I read was Crisis of the Modern World by Rene Guénon. Rene Guénon was a bit of odd. He was a traditionalist. He was a philosopher of the traditionalist school. I did a video on them the other day about Plato and how he corresponds to the traditionalists and how all the interesting parallels between them. Rene Guénon, he was French. He was an esotericist, so he wrote about esotericism and the occult and esoteric knowledge which is hidden away from the common people. And in Crisis of the Modern World, he gives some interesting insight into the problems with the modern world in contrast to a traditional world. But yeah, I can't get into everything because he discusses such a wide array of topics. He talks about profane science. He talks about the decline of intellectuality. He talks about quantity and quality. He talks about so much that's hard to really cover all of it in a video where I'm talking about multiple books. But that is a very, very good book. I don't know if I would recommend it because it's so dense and it's just hard to read, but it's still good if you want some more philosophical understanding. But other than that, there's also the book, I read Majesty by David Teems. Great book. It's about King James VI and First, and basically it talks about his life up to the point where the King James version of the Bible was basically constructed. And it's really, or translated, I'll say. But it's very, very interesting because he talks about all of the weird eccentricities, I think that's a word, of his personality. Talks about him being kind of odd, very crude, very, very crude, and a little antisocial, very well read, but just strange. And I did a video about King James the other day, and I talked about him, and I talked about that book in the video. So I would definitely suggest reading that. I can't remember any other books that I've read. There's probably something else that I read that I completely forgot about. But currently what I'm reading, I am reading The Confessions of St. Augustine, which is good. Very, very good. But it's very dense. It's kind of hard to read because of how dense it is. He talks about I mean, just all of the bad things that all of the sins he's committed. And like how he talks about all the people who trained him and all of he talks about being fascinated with people that he really shouldn't have been fascinated with ideas he shouldn't have been fascinated with. Talked about how he got caught up in crowds when he shouldn't have, and stuff like basically he talks about all the things that he shouldn't have done, which is it's really interesting, but it's even more interesting because like on the surface it just feels like, oh, it's this guy talking about all the things he shouldn't have done, but it's much deeper than that. He talks about the role of God, he's essentially writing to God. These are like prayers, basically. He's writing to God, and he's like he talks extensively about the nature of God and how good God is and how all loving God is, and it's very interesting to read, but it's dense, as I've said a million times before. But I am also reading Plato's Republic. I have so many opinions about Plato's Republic. I am going to probably do a whole series on Plato's Republic because there's so much to say about it, and there's so much I agree with and so much I disagree with, and it's so interesting because I don't know if I've ever read a dialogue, like something where it's like a back and forth conversation being the whole book, but it's very interesting reading like this book where it's like from the perspective of Socrates, but most historians and philosophers agree, yeah, this is not really what Socrates thought. Plato was just using Socrates as a mouthpiece in this book. But it's very interesting to read because you'll notice all these parallels between Plato's Republic and the modern day, and like it's very, very interesting. I want to do a series on Plato's Republic and how it influenced fascism as well as other totalitarian ideologies, and I want to do a video on the things I agree with in Plato's Republic, the things I disagree with. It's such an interesting book. I guess I would recommend it. It's, I don't know. It's definitely worth reading, I would say. It's very long. The copy I have of it, which I don't have on me, I think it's downstairs. It's 300 something pages, but it's still interesting to read. Anyway, the final book which I am currently reading is Storm of Steel by Ernst Junger. So Storm of Steel is the memoirs of Ernst Junger. He was a German soldier. And it's very interesting because it's not like All Quiet on the Western Front, which I have also read. It doesn't portray war in as much of a dark tone. I remember talking to my history teacher, and he said that it kind of romanticizes war. I kind of agree. It more romanticizes the impact of war, if that makes sense. Junger seems to have this idea that war can make you stronger or more virtuous even. And it's interesting because all of these, in his memoirs, he seems very stoic throughout the whole book. It's very interesting to read. He talks about getting shot over and over and over again, and like getting back up and picking himself back up and recovering later all the time. It's very strange how often he almost dies. But yeah. Anyway, Storm of Steel is a very interesting book. I read an article about it the other day, which I'm going to put in my description because it's a good article to read. It talks about some of the philosophical implications that Storm of Steel has. But yeah, I don't know if there's much else to talk about. I guess I can talk about the books which I'm planning on reading. I want to read the Iliad as well. I want to add that to my... I guess it's currently a trio of books that I'm reading, but I guess if I added the Iliad, it would be 4 books that I'd be reading all at the same time. I want to read the Iliad. I don't know if I'll start it this year or next year, but Yeah, and once I'm done with Confessions, I want to do, I think it's City of God that I want to read next, which is also by St. Augustine. And after I have all of those books you see in the background, that huge stack, those are all the books that I want to read after. So I've got that, and I think after Plato's Republic, I want to read Politics by Aristotle. At some point, I'm going to read Nicomachean Ethics and On the Soul and stuff, like all of Aristotle's works. I want to read Plato's Dialogues as well at some point. I have them somewhere here. But yeah, and after Storm of Steel, I don't, hold on. I don't remember what book that is, but I think it's about the 12 Caesars or something like that, which should be a good read. Yeah. So I think I've pretty much talked about everything I need to talk about in this video. That is all. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.